I got a video idea from Winston that I really wanted to bang one out on tonight because it's something I talk to the guys I coach about a lot, but maybe not all of them have heard, and I feel it's a good information to put out there in my opinion. The video topic is how to increase your consistency in the gym. I think especially relatively less advanced guys will find they have this huge fluctuation where they're doing the right things. They're showing up, and their goal is to progressively overload with time. Right? You're a step ahead of the game already, and then one session they're like, man, I don't know what happened. I came up, I got half the reps I got last week, let alone beating it. Right? I was like, I genuinely hit failure. I can't beat the books. Right? We're assuming this is like someone who's a driven individual who is not just giving up, right? They're coming in with the intention of beating the books, overloading, following their program, and they just come up super shy out of nowhere, right? And then they're back on track the next week, right? Learning how to avoid these days and make them less and less frequent is a lot of what defines becoming a better lifter. An advanced lifter will have these days very infrequently, and a beginner might have them fairly often, right? So we're going to kind of break down how to reduce how often that happens to you. The first and foremost thing, right, the number one thing, in my opinion, is controlling your outside the gym variables, right? So we're going to make sure our nutrition is on point, because a really quick way to have a shit session is to not eat properly the day before, the day of. You certainly can perform sometimes without that, but it doesn't help your chances of achieving progressive overload, right? So a lot of the time newer guys will be like, man, my program sucks. I like it, like it didn't work. Okay, well, if you didn't manage your outside the gym stuff, and you didn't put yourself in a position to achieve a consistent level of training, is it really the program's fault? The answer is no, it's your fault. Right? Similarly, sleep. If you're not putting yourself in a position to recover from workouts, most of the adaptations you're looking to make happen while you're sleeping. So if you're not sleeping enough, good luck adapting sufficiently, right? It can be done. People are going to be like, oh, well, I sleep like shit and I still make progress. Well, eventually that'll hamper your progress, right? Once you're a little bit more advanced, or maybe you could just make better progress if you did sleep sufficiently. Both of those being said, I really want to put this out there because I think people also hold them back because they're like, I slept like shit. This session's going to be bad. I'm a big fan of Carlos Reyes, and he's a full-time firefighter. Dude is smart as hell, works very hard, is the example of powerlifting done right, in my opinion, right? And he'll work a long shift as a firefighter, physically demanding job. He'll undereat during that time, or eat to the best of his ability, and he'll come in, and every indicator will say, oh, this should be a bad session, and he'll be like, well, randomly, when all indicators say it should be bad, I'll have a great training session. And to that degree, he says fatigue is a liar. Fatigue is real, right? Like, he doesn't mean that literally. It just means that sometimes, inexplicably, you'll have a good session when all of your indicators say you should have a bad session. So don't write off a session before you go in. You got to go try to know whether it's a bad session, but you can control your variables to the best of your ability. For different people in different fields of work, that ability changes, right? But really keeping yourself honest on controlling to the best degree that you can will reduce the frequency of those bad sessions. That's the obvious one. Winston asked me to make this video. Winston controls his outside the gym variables, right? That's not what he was asking, but I wanted to put that out there because that's the answer for, I would say, most of the people watching. Then you get into the more advanced stuff, right? The next thing that I think drastically increases the consistency at which you can perform is really, really dialing in your personalized warm-up process. I'm not one of those guys that says the only warm-up you should do is the bar, and I'm not one of those guys that says you should warm up for 45 minutes before you lift. I believe finding a warm-up process is both physically important and mentally important for preparing for the session and feeling like you're prepared for the session. I don't think you guys should waste a ton of time doing it, but I certainly think trial and erroring and finding a nuanced warm-up that addresses your specific issues, raises your core body temperature, gets you moving in relevant ranges of motion dynamically, emphasizes certain technical aspects that you wish to emphasize for the day. You can optimize that with time, basically, and getting that process really, really individualized, dialed in, and changing with time. It shouldn't be you have one warm-up, I've done it for 2 years, it's what works for me. It should change as your issues change, right? So finding that warm-up process would be the next step in consistency. And if you're feeling really good one day and really shit the other day and like you're like, why is this? And you don't have a good warm up, that would be where I would look next. And then I would say the third tier is really, really understanding your specific technique and being able to make adjustments on the way up, right? So you'll find if you have a lift that you do really well with, you might know that just intuitively. You're like, oh, based on the feel of that, I'm not doing this, and you'll fix it. Tossing your phone down and filming light warm-ups just so you can see what's going wrong if you feel something's off, and sticking at a weight until it feels good, right? Because if I take 2 plates and it feels like dog shit, why would I expect 2 1/4 to go well? Sometimes it does, but that's not a very smart assumption when you say it out loud, right? So long story short, you should be retaking weights. You should take your time to make sure you're optimizing your technique and fixing whatever your on the day errors are before you get to your working weight. It's better to spend an extra 10 minutes working your way up and get those things fixed and put in better quality work and trim an accessory than to speed up to that top set and execute poorly and do more accessories, right? There is definitely a skill component to this, and drilling the wrong thing is not what we want to be doing. Right, the most important thing are those main motions, right? And so taking the time to put yourself in a position to do those to the best of your ability, whether it means retaking weights. I will strip back down to 1 plate if something feels like shit and I have a session that I really have a number that I want to hit. I will go all the way back down to 1 plate and work back up until I can figure out what the fuck I'm doing wrong, right? And so being stubborn goes a long way in that regard. Don't just say, fuck it, I'll just try harder. Sometimes that works, most of the time it doesn't, right? So that would be the more advanced one, is really for yourself, learning to identify what small mistakes and deviations you're making from your good days and your bad days. That's why tossing your phone down and filming your warm-ups and comparing them to a video that you feel was your best performed set, right? Always having a reference video for each lift. So your technique is individual to you. So between sets, you shouldn't be comparing maybe you to a lifter you want to be like. There's too many differences there to make really minute changes. So what you should do is have the set that you feel is your best set and compare and contrast to that, right? And you're going to make the adjustments. Okay, what's the difference between what I'm doing today and that day I did great? And you're going to make it look more and more like that across your warm-ups. And maybe it won't be just like that day, but it'll be better than had you not done that. And then the next time you hit a set that you're like, man, that was my best set, that's now your reference video. Right, and this is why we have a huge advantage over people who did this prior to 2010. Just having a camera on you at all times, using that for something other than Instagram clout goes a really long way. Filming accessories just to double check your execution, great. But most of all, you can really, really hone in your form in the same session. Right? If you go look at throwers or you look at more technical sports than powerlifting, oftentimes they will film a throw and then go watch it in slow-mo and figure out what they're doing wrong. Obviously, our sport is not as technically demanding as that, but that's certainly something we could learn from. Go through, watch it in slow-mo, figure out what you're doing different, and try to hone that in. And not only are there going to be visual differences, but there's going to be internal cues that you need to change, right? Fixing my bench half the time is just trying to get the weight lower and lower my palm and drive through my lower palm and wedge my elbows in between my shoulder and my wrist, right? So that's one of my internal cues that in the video, not even I might be able to see that I'm not doing that, but I can feel it, right? And that's the other half, is knowing feels. And the only way you're going to do that is after having done a billion reps. And after each set, you get up and you acknowledge what I did right and what I did wrong. And very quickly you'll establish, when I do X, Y, or Z, things go better, right? So it's having to be really analytical and master each lift. So, kind of tying it together, Winston is a great squatter. Winston is a great deadlifter. Winston's not the greatest bencher. His technique is not bad at all, but it's not the lift that he internally understands to the same degree he understands squat. And probably the reason he's the least consistent on that is the same thing. It's not a build thing. It's not necessarily a technique thing. It's an intrinsic understanding of the lift and how to standardize it, right? Because more than likely, bar his pec issues that he has from time to time, it's not huge fluctuations in strength that leads to fluctuations in performance. It's very minute differences in feel and technique.